Country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pufa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. Country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pufa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar.
And good morning. Welcome to Sunday Review, the only news review talk show in Belize. Here on XTV, simulcasting on Crum Radio, with upon YouTube and Facebook, the XTV Belize Facebook and YouTube page live streaming. I'm the producer and host, Sister YaYa Marin Coleman. And the tag for this news talk show is Making Sense of the News. Our co-host is Brother Mutota, revolutionary from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning, Brother Mutota.
Morning, Sister YaYa. Good morning to our sister Esther. It's always a pleasure. And good morning to our listening audience. It's once again a pleasure to be on Sunday Review.
Good morning, Sister Esther Xosei, my soul sister. She's representing the diaspora, the Caribbean diaspora, Black people. She lives in England, was born in England. Parents are from the Caribbean. And she is known as a reparationist and a scholar activist. Good morning, Sister Esther.
Good morning, Sister YaYa and Brother Akko. Good morning. It's good to be here. Although for me, it's coming up to evening.
Yes, and you told me the time has changed.
Yes, the clocks went forward, I believe, by an hour.
Yes. So, this morning, in recognizing, in the United States, March is recognized as Women's History Month for women in the United States. And as I said, they're not really melanated women they talk about. They're really European women they talk about. And they're showing some melanated women to make them feel inclusive. And so this morning, I want to have on Sister Esther. Sister Esther is the third woman we're having on this month. It's Women's History Month. We had Sister Emily Turner, trade unionist, and we had on last week Francesca Salvoldi from Contested Ports, a European woman. So this is a third woman for this month. And of course, I'm thankful, Brother Akode. I always thankful there, but I'm especially thankful because of the framing of this morning's conversation, and it's focused on African people racialized as Black people, and we have the male-female energy. So, Sister Esther, I want to talk about women in leadership, and I talk about African women racialized as Black women in particular. And when I say in leadership, I mean in leadership of their own bodies, their families, near government organizations, NGOs, volunteer groups, religious organizations, from what I would call conscious or unconscious mindset, because the personal is political. So I want to ask Sister Esther, then I ask Brother Akko, how would you define being a conscious being or an aware being as an African presenting Black woman?
Wow, that's a really, really, a really great question in terms of being conscious and unconscious. So I guess in this context, for me, consciousness in Pan-African traditions is not simply about awareness. It's not just knowing facts about history. It's an active, ongoing process of understanding oneself, one's people, one's condition, one's purpose through an African-centered lens and allowing that understanding or overstanding, as Rastafari would say, to govern how one moves in the world. So I think for me, I see consciousness as praxis. It's not necessarily something you have, it is something that you do. And every day as a liberty, and I think in every choice, that's how I would describe it. And I think, you know, these terms, Black consciousness, we know obviously that was popularized by people like Stephen Biko. But if I were to just break it down in a simplified way, I think Black consciousness is the awareness of oneself as a person of African heritage and ancestry, who has been subjected to the specific historic and ongoing forms of racialized oppression, group-based oppression, such as racialized chattel enslavement, colonialism.
Sister Esther just froze. Okay.
Who refuses to internalize the dominant society's definitions of our life, of our worth, of our value, and most importantly, of our possibility and our potential. So I think leaning on definitions from people like Steve Biko, where he spoke about Black consciousness being the realization by the person racialized as Black of the need to rally together as well with other so-called Black people around the causes of our oppression, which is obviously our identity, and to operate as a group to rid ourselves of the shackles that have, that continue to dehumanize us and limit our life chances and possibilities. So that's how I would explain Black consciousness in the generic terms. And I think thinking about for a woman in leadership, it also is about how women in leadership know our heritage, and know that it's not incidental to our leadership, but it's central to it, because we are like that famous poem, I as a long memoried woman, we carry so much of our people's story within us, and it's not performative. It's not about performing so-called Blackness or our Africaneity in ways that are comforting to the hegemon or the dominant kind of society that is still oppressing us. It's about, for me, overstanding anti-African, anti-Blackness as structural and systemic, not merely personal or interpersonal. It's about leading in ways that serve our communities, our peoples, and our nations, and not just about fitting into dominant institutions that are not designed with us in mind. So yes, that's what it. Those are some of my initial reflections.
Brother Akko, only Sister Esther. All of that. And very, and I appreciate having reasonings with Sister Esther as a conscious sister, and who has been in leadership for decades, in the Caribbean and in Europe, on the continent of Africa. Brother Akko, make I hear your definition, how you identify yourself as a conscious being.
So before I attempt to answer that question, Sister YaYa, I just want to deviate a bit and to give a bit of history. Now, we are observing International Women's Month. And International Women's Month have become a big observance in the Western world. And those who don't know the history will assume that this is some kind of gift to women from the so-called modern Western. Well, in truth and in fact, the observance of International Women's Day and subsequently International Women's Month did not begin in the modern capitalist world. It actually began as a holiday in the Soviet Union. When Vladimir Lenin arranged March 8th as the day for women who sacrificed and participated in the Russian Revolution of 1917. So what you have now is a lot of pseudo-feminists, and I call them pseudo-feminists, who do not link the revolutionary character of International Women's Day with its current observance. So it did not begin in the capitalist world. The capitalist world actually saw women as dispensable, right? And a lot of the reaction, like a lot of things like the celebration of International Women's Day and other kinds of, like, for example, Social Security, which came into being in the US. These were things meant to counter the growing influence of the Soviet Union and the socialist and communist movement on the Western world. So I think it is important to understand because a lot of us forget the origins of these things, and we tend to believe these are gifts from the enlightened Western capitalist world. It is not. And if we don't understand this, and if we forget this history, what is going to happen, as we are seeing now, is that they're going to reverse these things gradually, because it is not in the character of capitalism, it's not in the character of imperialism to honor and recognize these things. One of the big movements in the US now, the anti-abortion movement, is, while it is projected one way, it is actually an attempt to suppress the independence of women. Not that I support abortion or anything like that, but it is an attempt to suppress women masquerading as another issue. So I think it's important to understand these things. So you have a lot of pseudo-feminists who are supporting war in Iran, because they say you have to bomb Iran in order for women to be free, not to wear. They did the same thing in Afghanistan and other parts of the world. And they support war in which women are killed and murdered, yet they said nothing about Saudi Arabia, where women can't drive, they have to go, the father to get permission and so on. And they said nothing about these same feminists. Okay? So I wanted to put that in there, because this is part of the problem with modern feminism. It is very much part of what I call the capitalist and imperialist order. And the narrative in too many instances represents and supports that imperialist and capitalist order. So this is how I distinguish those who are conscious from those who are not conscious. That if you are promoting a line, right, that supports capitalist exploitation, the exploitation of women in factories in Bangladesh and in Vietnam to get your Gucci and your Birkin bag, and then you're going to march for International Women's Day, that to me is pseudo-feminism, okay? And it's inconsistent with the origination and the idea of International Women's Day, which was started by the revolutionary movement and the revolution of 1970 in the Soviet Union. And actually, before it was made a holiday, again, the Socialist Women's Organization in the US is who began an observation of International Women's Day. And today you hear nothing about this because everybody about Michelle Obama and all of these people who are as distant from so-called feminism and what some people call womanism and progressive development of women as anything else. So I wanted to give that history there because too many of us are not aware of this history. So to go back to sort of answer the question that you posed about consciousness, for me, I want to take it from the position of a male. Now, I was in the revolutionary movement, and we were not aware of what was patriarchy, because in the organizations, most of the organizations were dominated by men, okay? And in so many instances, women's views were kind of appendage and not really a central part of the narrative. And so over time, the men in the revolutionary movement had to learn to what I consider to be feminists, to understand the feminist model. So in terms of my consciousness, for example, when I moved to the US to live permanently in the 1990s, these ideas were becoming very prominent in the African American community. And there was a woman who wrote a book called Michelle Wallace. The book was called Black Macho and the Myth of the something, Black Macho. That's the title of the book. I'll have to remember it, but Michelle Wallace. So anyway, and she was, excoriated and criticized. She's dogging black men and all of this kind of stuff. I began to read, Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. That is the title of the book, Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. So to sort of understand what the debate was all about, because I had this bookstore and the debate was taking place, I began to read this book. And this was it was an eye opener for me, because I found out my own limitations and prejudices in terms of understanding women's role in the struggle. And so a lot of men have to read more to understand the point that women are making, this double burden of being woman, being black, and so on in society. So the thing was, the black man had the burdens and so on. But women also had their own forms of discrimination as women, even though they were in the struggle. So I think men had to understand that. And I think, too, that some of the women, they accepted this historical burden without understanding that they had to educate men to make them understand what I call the conscious version of feminism. And having said that, though, one of the things we have to be careful of is because what Western civilizations tend to do is to give you quantity and not quality. So once the idea that women need to be equal began to take root, that they were discriminated against, they brought it to the UN and they began then to sort of, decide how many quota of women must get into this and how many quota of women must get into politics and so on. So what eventually happened is that the origin of International Women's Day, as it was implemented in the West, or what I would call the characters of International Women, as it was implemented in the West, did not change qualitatively the value of women. So you had women leaders like Indira Gandhi in India and Banda Naike in Sri Lanka. Those are two of the earliest women in Asia who became leaders of their countries. But they did not pursue policies that were different from the men. They pursued the same capitalistic, exploitative, anti-worker policies. So we have to understand. So the point I'm making, I'm going to end here, is that we have to understand contextually, how this thing emerged and how this was hijacked by the West to give us a version of feminism that is not consistent with either our historical realities or the service of humanity. That's what I would say. And that, to me, must be understood.
Excellent input, Brother Akka. Sister YaYa, Sister YaYa, no, I don't want to go higher today. Sister Esther, what's your 2 cents based on what Brother Akka just shared?
Absolutely. I couldn't, there's nothing more for me to add. I think it's so important to give that history. And also where you ended up, Brother Akko, it reminds me of some of the analysis of Dr. June Terpstra, who talks about or writes about women of the hegemon, as she calls them. So these women who stand by their hegemonic men. So as you said, they don't actually transform the system. They literally get co-opted into it. And we've seen examples of hegemonic women leaders who are just the same as men, who exhibit the worst forms of malevolent patriarchy, because patriarchy in itself, to me, is not all malevolent. There is, bell hooks recognizes and also writes about the benevolent patriarch, which I think we need to bear in mind too, so that we're not just throwing out everything. Because I know there is a lot of focus, certainly in the UK, on what is called toxic masculinity. And when there's so much focus on what the problem is, the question then becomes, well, what is a progressive form of masculinity that men can actually aspire to and relate to. So yes, I totally endorse what Brother Akko has shared, and it's so important for us to have that critical analysis. It's not just about being a woman; it's what kind of woman, what kind of leader, what kind of class politics, and other kind of politics does that woman espouse.
We'll definitely get to that. And I have to make a note for you to make when we get to the next segment, and because the personal is political, to talk about the malevolent and benevolent leadership, what that mean exactly. And before we go to our break, I definitely want to share the difference, Sister Esther, when it relates to feminism and womanism.
Okay.
Go ahead and share that now before we go to break.
What did you say, Sister YaYa?
You could go ahead and share the difference between feminism and womanism before we go to break.
Oh gosh, that is a heavy exploration to do before we go to the break. I mean, there are different.
Just to differentiate it from a European and African women perspective.
Well, feminism, one, there isn't one feminism for a start, and so I don't really want to flatten it, but the notion of womanism has really come out of the experience of women of African heritage and ancestry. We have popularized that term. I think she's called Professor Cleonara, I believe, Helms or something like that, who promotes what the term Africana womanism, and there's like 16 characteristics of what it is. And it's basically women who are in concert with men who in our communities who are struggling for the restoration of the dignity of our peoples, albeit that we have different ways in which we'll do that as men and women. It's to be self-naming and self-defining in the world. These are part of the 16 characteristics. It talks about the spirituality and culture that we carry, that has animated us and that has kind of kept us going as part of our resilience and transcendence. And obviously another person who has spoken about womanism is Alice Walker, and she has a particular definition. So the idea of womanism for me is more appropriate because it doesn't just analyze us in terms of sex, our sex as women. It looks at us as holistic beings who also are part of communities and therefore experience kind of intersectional forms of oppression and discrimination and dispossession that need to be factored in. So sometimes it is about semantics, because depending on the type of feminist you are, you might actually espouse what other so-called womanists define as womanism and vice versa. So that's why I was saying it's complex, because just like with many terms, there are many different practices, and ultimately people are self-determining in terms of how they describe their preference for using a term like feminism or indeed womanism.
That's exactly what I look for. That work. Brother Akko, you want to add anything?
Well, one of the things that modern feminism did, the discourse on modern feminism, right, is that it made people of African descent study our own traditional systems to get an understanding of how do we fit into this thing. Because initially this was really an idea that came out of European women and they had a particular kind of oppression they suffered under their men. And so they wanted to lift, free themselves from what they consider male domination and so on and so forth. But if you look at our traditional systems in Africa, in India, um, what is called the global south, there have been societies where matriarchal leadership existed. But because of the erasure to a large extent of, of our history by the West and our own ignorance of our own history, we never understood, some of these concepts in that context. Like, there is an interesting book, which I quote a lot, we read a lot in the 1970s. It's called the Ushaba, and it's about the South Africa. And one of the quotes in the book is, it says that when a boy is born, a world is created. But when a girl is born, God himself comes to earth. Such is the value of woman, you know? And so we are beginning to understand that we had our own, interpretations of these definitions. There's another interesting book called Radiance from the Waters by Sylvia Arden Boone, who went to study the Mende woman in Sierra Leone and found out that this was a matriarchal organization with its own systems of training young girls and so on and so forth. So we had these things which we never knew. So when we began to speak of womanism, right, as against the feminism of the West, which is a cold statistical kind of static thing, people say, where is our perspective? And so this is how the term womanism, these traditional systems of seeing the world through our context began to play into the narrative, which is very, very important because our societies have always valued women, our traditional systems. That is not to say that we didn't have contradictions and so on. But you study the culture of a lot of these traditional societies, there was serious respect and honor for women. And in fact, sometimes some of the kings and chiefs, they were traced from the matriarchal side of the family, not the male side of the family. And this is something that we never really discussed. They lumped Africa as this primitive place where women are brutalized and female genitalia and all of this thing. And even that debate itself is something that, again, the European feminist movement used to malign Africa. Because in every culture, they are called what are called traditions and irrelevant traditions. All of them have traditions that are irrelevant. And so in some societies, the irrelevant traditions take a little longer for them to cease to exist. But what they did is to seize on this and label all African civilization, all history, as this backward, anti-woman kind of civilization. So this is where, in exploring womanism and so on, we began to add a different philosophical dimension and also to change the narrative from this Western-centered feminism in which women were rebelling because they wanted to take off bras and not wear panties. That's how some of these things were. I mean, some very trivial kinds of things. Oh, they don't want to cook because the men for all of these things, and so womanism tended to look at these things from a different perspective and to bring a traditional view of this right of women to the debate around feminism.
Excellent conversation. And to add my 2 cents to what Brother Akko said, when you look at a number of these traditional practices, primarily of melanated people, a number of their deities, their overstanding of the creation and the creator and the world were women. If their creator, if their divinities were women, it definitely reflects the cultural value of that group of people in overstanding their self and for their connection to the creator and the natural environment. So big respect. Hi, sir, evening, Sister Esther, Brother Akko. This first segment, as we continue for stretch talking on African women, racialized as Black women who may identify as conscious or aware beings, as it relates to their leadership, because the personal is political. So when we come back in at the second segment, in looking at the personal is political, we're going to talk about African women racialized as Black women who oftentimes have been conditioned to accept that being strong women is the way to lead at the great price of sacrificing our own beings, and how that shows up in our bodies, how it impact with families and the people in our support system, how oftentimes our contributions are not remembered, our life lessons not used as guideposts for future, especially younger women leaders. And so I can look forward to that reasoning in the second segment. Right now, we're going to take a quick break and come right back. Thanks, Sister Esther and Brother Akko.
Thank you.
YaYa 501 is an effort to catalog and digitize more than 30 years of Carol and Richard Foster's extraordinary wildlife footage, a visual record of Belize's wild heart that has been shared with the world through platforms like BBC and National Geographic. This exhibition brings that work to life through new short wildlife films that Carol has been working on over the past few months. Curated photographs that capture the iconic Foster perspective, and hundreds of archival recordings that are now being preserved and made accessible for the first time.
But YaYa 501 is more than just an exhibition or a gallery of pretty pictures. It is a living, breathing archive. It is a monumental effort to catalog, digitize, and preserve a cinematic history that belongs to all of us. The Fosters didn't just come here to film Belize. They chose to be Belize. They made this wild landscape their home and their life's mission. As award-winning filmmakers for giants like the BBC and National Geographic, they acted as our global ambassadors.
I knew I had to do something, and I wanted to do something, and I was looking through all my slides and looking through all, and I've been doing this for like more than a year, trying to get everything in, from past to present to future. I know that was my intentions of giving back to Belize.
For decades, BEL has powered Belize's growth and progress, lighting homes, energizing industries, and fueling national development. But in a world reshaped by extreme weather patterns, digital transformation, and evolving customer needs, the future of energy demands a new approach. The future of energy is now, and it's not just about new technology, it's about people and how we use, manage, and store power smarter. BEL is leading the transformation, blending modern advancements with the wisdom of sustainable energy practices. Integrating technologies will redefine how Belize produces and uses energy. With distributed generation and smart grid technologies, customers are becoming power partners. Energy is no longer a one-way street. BEL is making key investments that will reinforce the grid to make this a reality, ensuring energy security for generations. At BEL, we are more than an energy provider. We work to safeguard Belize's energy future, which will have demand response programs, where customers will be able to shift use during peak hours to take advantage of the new time of use or off-peak rate structures, customer energy portals, real-time insights and tools to track usage and manage energy smarter, smart metering, advanced metering infrastructure, faster, safer service and actionable energy insights, distributed generation, integrating rooftop solar, microgrids and battery storage for two-way power flows into the national grid. Together, we are bringing you a brighter tomorrow.
Smart for everybody. Smart leading everything. Smart give you everything. Smart offer everything. Smart give you everything. North to the east and the south and the west. Smart are the best. Darling, double up my data and give me all the text. In fact, give me a plan for my family. Unlimited calls, so me like it. And Smart make everybody feel happy. Bringing people together, me want it now. Smart got love for everybody. Me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. Me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. More bundles, data plan. Me want my smartphone, internet in my hand. Call me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. Smart. Stay connected. Stay happy.
At Atlantic Bank, your convenience is our priority. Our contact center is designed to enhance your banking experience. With a wide range of customer service options, you save time and effort. You can easily call in to block or unblock your debit and credit cards, perform account inquiries, and access detailed card information. Whether you need assistance with online banking, merchant support, or general inquiries, our team is ready to help. For added convenience, if all operators are busy, you can leave your number and an operator will return your call as soon as possible to ensure you receive the support you need. Depending on your transaction type, we may need to verify your identity through a set of security questions. And remember, Atlantic Bank will never request your username or password for Atlantic Online via phone call, text, or email, ensuring your personal information remains safe and secure. Our support team is available Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in both English and Spanish. Simply dial 223-1212. This is a dedicated line for our contact center. Atlantic Bank is committed to providing you with exceptional service and the tools you need to manage your finances conveniently and securely. Take full advantage of our easy-to-use contact center services today.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
At Habet and Abet and Brothers Abet, we've always proudly celebrated Women's Month. This year, we celebrate women keeping the balance at home, at work, and in their communities. That's why all March long, all women receive 15% off store-wide, from paints to plumbing and everything in between. Plus, 20 to 65% off lots more deals on sale and clearance. With trusted experience, top quality products, and service that's second to none, we're here to support women every step of the way. Visit or call us today. Happy Women's Month from all of us at Habet and Abet and Brothers Abet, doing our part to balance the scales.
In a democracy, what is good for the government cannot be bad for the people. And what is good for the people cannot be bad for the government.
We came a long way. It's like over 16 years that it was basically like 2-3 houses in that area.
It was wild. One high bush like jungle. I want to take my lick. Say no water, no light. I tell her no worry about that. We have figured it out.
You know, you wonder how long it will take for this to happen.
A year ago, you were considered squatters.
We made a picado and we came in. I made a teenager. Everybody said it was swamp, it was swamp. When we get in here, it was like gold.
Today, you're landowners.
Very this that for we, and we proud of this.
Now we're claiming our house on the land.
We have worked so hard to make this happen for us.
This is a beautiful day, folks, because we are taking care of the people who have taken care of us. Because we wouldn't be here today without you.
The Belize Tax Service has been serving the country well since its inception. But like many tax administration systems worldwide, it faces new challenges that require modern solutions. The Semi-Autonomous Revenue Authority, SARA, will be established by legislation that will modernize how Belize administers taxes. Countries across our region, Jamaica, Barbados, and Guyana, have undertaken similar efforts at modernization, and we're using their experiences, successes, and challenges to design a SARA specific to our tax landscape. SARA will operate under the Ministry of Finance with an advisory board comprised of experts in finance, tax, law, and public administration who will provide sound guidance while maintaining the required oversight of public funds. SARA will provide the framework for modernizing tax administration, improving the way we serve taxpayers, and supporting Belize's development. A semi-autonomous revenue authority, SARA, will create opportunities for improving human resource management, accelerating digital transformation that reduces turnaround time and paperwork, and providing more responsive customer service while maintaining strict accountability standards. SARA, a progressive tax administration for a modern Belize.
Marlon Castillo Quality Meats. For the best in beef and pork. Check them out at Booth 39 at the Michael Finnegan Market. Call 614-2255. Marlon Castillo Quality Meats open Monday to Saturday 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Sundays 6 a.m. to 12 noon. Booth number 39 Michael Finnegan Market. Last gate, first meat shop at the back. Check them out on Facebook at Marlon Castillo Quality Meats. Stop in today.
Beautiful people of Lake Independence, you have kept me humble and grounded. You set the standard for love. Anything after are just imitation. There was nothing like Lake I love.
Love yours. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Ufa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots.
Welcome back to Sunday Review with Sister Esther, Xosei, Brother Mutota, me, Sister YaYa, Marin, Coleman. It's based on the United States. Well, I just said the United States, but Brother Akko frame it. This is originally out of Russia. Recognizing March as International Women's History Month. And so in this segment, I want to look at the personal is political. I want Sister Esther and then Brother Akko tell me how they interpret that. And one of the things where I find for my own liberty is that based on where I am in my individual growth, how I interpret something changes. Or it may not. So has the personal, how would you define the personal is political, Sister Esther and Brother Akko? And if the interpretation and the understanding of that statement has evolved over time as you live and be?
Yeah, I guess for me, the personal is political, which is traditionally associated as being a feminist slogan. is really about saying that personal experiences, and particularly women's struggles, including struggles with patriarchy, are rooted in social and power structures. That's how I interpret the personal as political, rather than just being about like individual failings or, you know, a bad apple or what have you. So it's about how we bridge our private life with also public policy and systems of, you know, domination and oppression that impact us, including issues to do with labor, abuse and violence that we experience, and other kind of political matters. That's how I interpret the meaning of the personal is political. And personally in my life, it means because I define myself as a Pan-Africanist and reparationist, it is about how I internalize the meaning of repair, you know, throughout all of my life. It's not like I do it like I'm here on this program and I'm talking one thing and then behind closed doors I'm living another reality. No, it's a seamless thing. It's a constant, even struggle with the self, you know, struggle against one's own weaknesses and all kinds of things to actually be the change that we wish to see, and to mean it, to not just talk it, but to walk it. That's how I interpret the personal as political.
And Sister Esther, Brother Akko?
So, in my humble opinion, Sister YaYa, your underlying philosophy is what determines your political and personal. What is your philosophy? How do you interpret the world? So if you look at a lot of our people, even some who call themselves progressive, leftists and whatever, their philosophy derives from what they consider their Christian Bible. And the Christian Bibles are very patriarchal document, right, with a lot of abuse and disrespect of women, you know. And so a lot of people interpret the world through that context. And therefore, a lot of what we see has to do with how we have been indoctrinated through religion and through the philosophy derived from religion. Now, I'll give you a counter philosophy. The legend of what they call Osa and Oset, or Isis and Osiris, which is how in the ancient Kemetic text, they spoke about how, you know, they were the founders of the human species and so on. And it says that, I'm going to use the European sense, Isis and Osiris, not Osa and Oset, which is the Kemetic. And it says that Isis, who is a female, she is the sister of Osiris because she's a spirit of equal rank. Now, this is in the context of the spirituality of African people. You understand where it's at? She is the sister because she's a spirit of equal rank. She's the wife because she alone can satisfy his highest cravings. Okay? And she's mother because it is the duty of all women to be mother. Now, you see where the idea of the Trinity comes from. We have one idea of the Trinity, but this is our Trinity. So if a society evolves from that kind of philosophical context, then your personal is going to be different. You're going to have a different relationship to woman, to mother, and to the idea of sisterhood and brotherhood. Okay? But again, we, as I said, we have been indoctrinated with this chosen people concept, a false doctrine reinterpreted and written by men who lied, and every pope and king who come change it. And that is where our personal responses come. Another thing is, you know, when I was a teenager, I used to go to the movies a lot. And it's all related to what I'm doing about the personal here. So you go to the movies, and all the movies as a to a large extent, most of them, it was always about patriarchy. Sometimes the cowboy is betrayed as a woman who betrayed the cowboy or betrayed the star. And so you hear men would walk out of the movie and they would say, boy, woman again, you see what other woman calls a man. And we don't understand we are being educated and that idea is being reinforced, our personal response to our sisters. But all of this is part of the capitalist order. All of this is part of the imperialist neo-colonial order. So when we speak of the personal, we have to deconstruct what that is from the position where we are. And we have to reconstruct a new philosophy and a new reality based on our history and traditions. This is why it comes back again to what this idea of womanism. If you go back to the legend of Isis and Osiris, or Osano said, you hear she said, she is sister because she's a spirit of equality. She's wife because she can satisfy her cravings. And she's mother because the duty of all women to be mother. So this is the what you may call the philosophical shroud that we as Africans, and before that I quoted the one from the Zulu people, which said that when a boy comes to earth, a world is created. When a woman comes to earth, God himself comes. So we inculcated in our psyche and consciousness an idea of womanhood and its relationship to men that was different from what we now have. So the personal and the political are never really separate. What philosophy you have is what's going to seep into your personal life, and what philosophy you have is going to determine your politics. And that's how I see that.
Excellent, Brother Akko. Your understanding has evolved over the years, Brother Akko? But when we look at this particular statement?
Yes, I have evolved to understand, hopefully, things better. We all learn, as I said in the earlier stage, remember I said, when I read this book, Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman, I understood the argument that our African-American sisters were making. I also read bell hooks. I had bell hooks in my store on one occasion. So these things were learning experiences for me. So you see, sometimes you have an idea of equality, but it is very superficial. You know, you say, oh, it's sisters in the movement, but very superficial. Because you are so indoctrinated with this idea of male domination and male, what I call man had to lead the thing, right? That it has become almost reflex until you begin to study. And I said to deconstruct some of these ideas that you yourself have been indoctrinated with, whether it's in the Bible or whether it's in the movies. I told you before, you go to the movies and all these ideas of women were always are doing subterfuge and creating mischief for this time. And we inculcated these things. So once we began to deconstruct our reality, we began to reconstruct a new reality. It's like this story again in the movies with the Indians and the white Americans. When the white Americans defeated the Indians, it was a victory. When the Indians defeated them, it was a massacre. So all of these things we have to deconstruct because it's a narrative that you've been taught, and when you've been entertained is the time when you've been educated. This is why Hollywood is possibly one of the greatest inventions Europeans have created to put us to sleep. And because it puts us to sleep, and then we learn all of these things, all of these ideas, this so-called LGBTQIA identity politics, all of that is part of the Hollywood creation. You understand? And create confusion. So the point is that we have to continue a process of deconstruction of our reality and reconstructing the new reality that we want. You understand? It has to do with how you shape your imagination and so on and so forth. But we have to study, which is something we are not doing. We are being fed information. We are consuming information like we're consuming fried chicken, without understanding that information must be analyzed critically and deconstructed. Like some of my wife will tell me in the past, you know, so I don't like to watch a movie with you because I'm analyzing the movie while I'm looking at it. Because you have to do that. No, it may cause some problems for people, but you have to, because the movie is infused with, it is not objective. You know, and this is how we are taught a lot of what we are today, socially and culturally, is what we have imbibed from Eurocentric ideas through movies, through songs, right, and all of these kinds of things. You know, a lot of the romantic songs, for example, is love without responsibility. You know, all of these kinds of romantic love without understanding what love is. You know, and so it's a whole process of deconstruction. So when it comes to this idea of feminism and womanism and what we understand of it, about it, we have to deconstruct our own ideas and reconstruct new ideas of what this is.
Thanks, Brother Akka. Sister Esther, what were some thoughts going through your mind when you listened to Brother Akka just now?
Just how profound his responses have been on this subject. And that's why I think whenever we're discussing women or men, that actually it should be a mixed sex conversation, not just to, like, as women. Yes, obviously we are the authority on our womanhood, but it is really important, I think, to discuss these issues in dialogue with brothers and vice versa, so that we can get the holistic picture, and to also just be exposed to the different perspectives and ways of seeing an issue, different from how we see it, maybe.
I agree. One of the things I find, I know I am, it's one of the things I yearn for, is this level of conversation with sisters and brothers. But at least my lived experience so far, that is something where I find plentiful. It's very rare, and I value those relationships like the one I have with you and with Brother Akko, that I really value those relationships because it helped me with my own repair based on how I've lived my life up to this point. Because if you're not even willing to say, this life where I live, to work for me. I know this is how my parents taught me, or how I say other people in the community where nurture me come from, but this is not a work for me. And my lived experience, oftentimes, I don't know where I work. I don't know where I work, but I definitely know when not to work. And what has been traditionally fed to me, explained to me, taught to me on the responsibility of one Black woman from a Caribbean country, that no work for me. And so I spent quite a bit of time resisting has to no work. And then along the way, I might stumble upon somebody or something or an idea or an experience. I'm like, I never think about it that way there. That's different. Make I look upon that. Make I listen to this YouTube video. Make I listen to this record. Make I talk to this person. And then the more the experience I have, I start to feel better in my spirit. I start to feel more courageous. I get more curious. I get excited for learn more about things where later on I want to understand that this is a part of my relearning, awakening, repairing. In my live experience, I never know that at the time. I just know what I live, no work for me. And I find that would be true for a lot of, let's say, African people, because we're being force-fed European values and beliefs and norms, which are the singular dominant narrative. One serious conflict with the spirit, because that no help nurture with fullness for who we were born to be. So and I think that part Brother Akko and others have said that you have this dual consciousness that is always at play, and at the same time you still have to get up and take a shower and clean the house and communicate with people you live with and care for the people that were around you and the community. And most of them people know they agree with what you express or how you choose to live. So before we go to break, we're gonna have like a minute each. Just tell me for thoughts based on what I just said about constantly having to live this dual reality, especially when you don't have the kind of nurturing community or support to affirm one alternative way of understanding yourself as an African being?
Well, I guess for me, that's just part of the challenge and contradiction that my life has thrown up. And what happens when you choose to kind of fight for liberation in a world and even amongst, say, family and community members who, for whatever reason, don't recognize that they still are in need of liberation. And that is a real challenge, because you find yourself often, and I've spoken to many people like me in different ways, not necessarily like me, but people who tend to go against the grain. And I think it's a common experience that we all have. And it is a heavy kind of burden and weight to carry, knowing that you're not just going to go along to get along because that's what you're hearing from peers or what you're seeing on the TV or what, even other members of your group, your community group that you associate with or are part of, how they think and feel. So yeah, it's about, I think that's just part of the the burden that we carry as being freedom seekers, and for some, who are revolutionaries as well, because that it means to be a revolutionary means to kind of turn things on its head. It is about 360-degree change, as far as as far as I see it. Sorry, it's not just about fitting in with the status quo or trying to position ourselves in a better way or just to be in a more elevated position. No, it's about the whole system has to change, and that's my understanding of it.
Thanks, Sister Esther. Brother Akko?
So it for me, again, it is rooted in philosophy. You go back to GGM James Stolen Legacy, in which I don't remember the particular name, but I think it's the news, but it's about knowledge, in which he said one of the first laws of knowledge is observation, in which you observe phenomena. That's what a scientist does. A scientist will look at two chemicals and look at the reaction and observe. Then he starts writing, if X meet Y, this happens. And then he said observation, then inquiry into the meaning of things. So after you look at the chemicals, how they react in the tube or whatever, you say, okay, let me inquire what caused this. 4 parts of cyanide or 2, what caused this? So you inquire into the meaning of this thing. And then after that, you develop an analysis and then a synthesis, right? This is how this thing works. The central point I'm getting to here is that is the path to knowledge. Once you know, you can no longer ignore. After observation, inquiry, then you develop a thesis, synthesis, you can no longer ignore. So this knowledge is what imposes on you in a capitalist society. This knowledge is about self, your history. This knowledge imposes on you a responsibility to act. But when you do that, you are inconsistent with the realities of the society. It therefore imposes a burden on you that is not easy to carry. But this is where, again, going back to the Asians, this is where character comes in. This is why one of the key things of knowledge, when you talk about the grand lodges of Luxor, when you went in there, one of the things that was character. Our education system doesn't teach character, because character is what leads to you having the courage to make tough decisions. So it's a question now of whether you know and whether you will have the courage to act on what you know. And that, to me, is what is the duality all about. You know, and therefore you must act. Sometimes those who know and don't act, what they happen is they perish into all kind of degrading behavior, alcoholism and other kinds of antisocial behavior. So this is the thing we have. Do we know something and then ignore it and perish in the flames of, weaknesses? Or do we stand firm, fully knowing that this is truth and we have to have a commitment to that truth. And that is how the conflict I see what you call the duality of living in a capitalist society. We always remember that material conditions or physical conditions determine what are the metaphysical conditions. If we don't have an earth, we may not have a divinity. But we have a divinity only because we have an earth. So we must understand that. You know? So these things are important to have a grasp of, in my view.
That's the reasoning. And really to feed my soul this morning. We're going to take a quick break and come back for the last segment.
Get your body sculpted with gym equipment and accessories from Benny's. Quality and savings.
Smart for everybody. Smart leading everything. Smart give you everything. Smart offer everything. Smart give you everything. North to the east and the south and the west. Smart are the best. Darling, double up my data and give me all the text. In fact, give me a plan for my family. Unlimited calls so me like it. And Smart make everybody feel happy. Bringing people together, me want it now. Smart got love for everybody. Me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. Me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. More bundles, data plan. Me want my smartphone, internet in my hand. Call me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. Smart. Stay connected. Stay happy.
While 501 is an effort to catalog and digitize more than 30 years of Carol and Richard Foster's extraordinary wildlife footage, a visual record of Belize's wild heart that has been shared with the world through platforms like BBC and National Geographic. This exhibition brings that work to life through new short wildlife films that Carol has been working on over the past few months. Curated photographs that capture the iconic Foster perspective, and hundreds of archival recordings that are now being preserved and made accessible for the first time.
But while 501 is more than just an exhibition or a gallery of pretty pictures, it is a living, breathing archive. It is a monumental effort to catalog, digitize, and preserve a cinematic history that belongs to all of us. The Fosters didn't just come here to film Belize. They chose to be Belize. They made this wild landscape their home and their life's mission. As award-winning filmmakers for giants like the BBC and National Geographic, they acted as our global ambassadors.
I knew I had to do something, and I wanted to do something, and I was looking through all my slides and looking through all. I've been doing this for like more than a year, trying to get everything in, from past to present to future. That was my intentions of giving back to Belize.
En Atlantic Bank, tu comodidad es nuestra prioridad. Nuestro centro de contacto está diseñado para mejorar tu experiencia bancaria, con una amplia gama de opciones de servicio al cliente. Ahorras tiempo y esfuerzo. Puedes llamar fácilmente para bloquear o desbloquear tus tarjetas de débito y crédito, realizar consultas de cuentas y acceder a información detallada de tus tarjetas. Ya sea que necesites asistencia con la banca en línea, apoyo para comercios o consultas generales, nuestro equipo está listo para ayudarte. Para mayor comodidad, si todos los operadores están ocupados, puedes dejar tu número y un operador te devolverá la llamada lo antes posible para asegurarse de que recibas el apoyo que necesitas. Para mayor seguridad, es posible que necesitemos verificar tu identidad con un conjunto de preguntas sencillas. Recuerda, Atlantic Bank nunca solicitará tu nombre de tu usuario ni contraseña de Atlantic Online por llamada telefónica, mensaje de texto o correo electrónico, asegurando que tu información personal permanezca segura y protegida. Nuestro equipo de apoyo está disponible de lunes a viernes, de 8 a.m. a 6 p.m. en inglés y en español. Simplemente marca al 223-1212. Esta es la línea dedicada para nuestro centro de contacto. Atlantic Bank se compromete a brindarte un servicio excepcional y las herramientas que necesitas para administrar tus finanzas de manera conveniente y segura. Aprovecha al máximo nuestro servicio del centro de contacto.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
Hey, that's a train.
Me too.
Guatemala, country bad love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. Country bad love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This that we we the fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This that we the fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This that me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the help and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people love them country bad love them.
Brother Akko and myself, Sister YaYa, would have one reason about African women racialized as black with a level of awareness from an alternative worldview other than European in leadership. And so, I have a lot of time left. We have like about maybe 17 minutes. And so I really want Sister Esther remind me that in the first segment, I had talked about the strong black woman and Bell Hooks' read on malevolent and benevolent leadership. Sister Esther, pick up on that for me.
Yeah, so Bell Hooks is well known for coining this phrase, the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. And so it's important to, for Bell Hooks, she saw that patriarchy doesn't operate alone. It's always interlocked with racism, classism, and imperialism. And that essentially her argument is that patriarchy harms everyone, not only women, but it harms men too, because it imprisons men in rigid emotional roles. It suppresses their capacity for love and tenderness, and therefore to express their full humanity. And it produces what she refers to as a dance of contempt in place of genuine intimacy. So the book that she kind of talks about this a lot is a book called We Real Cool, Black Men and Masculinity. And she defines, that is, Bell Hooks defines patriarchs, benevolent patriarchs, as men who exercise their power without using force. These men are nice, but they nonetheless are patriarchally oppressive. So she gives examples like the benevolent patriarch does not hit, shout, or overtly coerce. He may genuinely support women's equality in the workplace and in public life. He may call himself even a feminist ally or womanist ally, can be warm, caring, even loving on the surface. Is fine with women getting equal pay, working outside of the home, and loves feminism when it benefits him. So the problem with benevolent patriarchy, according to Bell Hooks, is that it still, operates from a position of male entitlement. So it's where men will still expect their needs, their comfort, their authority to kind of dominate or take precedence over, or to be centered, let me say. And for, in some people's estimations, the benevolent patriarch is sometimes even more dangerous than the malevolent patriarch, because it's harder to name, it's harder to see. Now, the malevolent patriarch then is one who operates through overt force, violence, terror, and coercion. He is a version, I guess, of what in the UK they're talking a lot about toxic masculinity that people come to realize. He could be called an abuser, a tyrant, a dominator, a dictator, who uses physical and psychological violence to enforce submission in others, particularly women around him. But however, Bell Hooks doesn't really focus too much on the so-called malevolent patriarch, because there's already a lot of focus and attention, and there's already a lot of language for describing men like this. And I think one of the key points that comes out of this analysis of the benevolent and the malevolent patriarch is that it's not about the man as an individual, but it's about the system that produces both. So it's a systemic issue, because both the malevolent and the benevolent patriarch are kind of products of the same system. So the man who, for instance, beats his wife or partner, and the man who smiles warmly at, say, the women's conference that he attends, while subtly undermining every woman that challenges him, are both operating within that same patriarchal kind of logic. So that's the explanation that Bell Hooks gives, which I think is quite interesting. I'd be interested in your thoughts on it, Brother Akko.
I appreciate that, Sister Esther. Brother Akko?
Well, it reminds me of the thing in the movie with the good cop and the bad cop. Right? So people look at the concept of the good cop and the bad cop. But it's really what she said is the system. You see, the system is the problem. Because, and what we're not analyzing, which is something I said in an interview last week, we are not analyzing the system. We tend to believe that, and I think so, and I'm not trying to be critical, but I think somebody said just about isms and schisms. We tend to reduce debate on the system to trivialities. And this is a way of, they say the devil's trick is to convince you it doesn't exist. Right. So capitalism's trick is to convince you that it's not bad. So whenever you raise contradictions of capitalism, well as what you just explained in terms of the benevolent patriarch or the malevolent patriarch, that's just ism and schism. But it is the capitalist system, which colonialism, slavery wasn't invented because it was just because they wanted to enslave black people. It was for profit. And then they added these other things. So slavery was the ultimate expression, the chattel slavery of capitalism. And so what they have been able to convince us is to not debate this economic model, because this is what it is. It's an economic model based on who controls the wealth and how you organize the material conditions of a society. And the material condition of society is economics, is land, is whatever, determines the social relationships of a society. And for some reason, we are not debating this. They have been able to do a very good job, right? So we believe poverty is natural. God made poor people because the Bible rationalizes poverty. Well, in the very same Bible tells us the earth is bountiful and plentiful enough for all of us to live comfortable lives. But we forget that part of it. You're what I'm talking about. And so we have to understand the dominant organization of economics and politics, because a lot of these social relations, whether it's men and women, whether it is with our children, relation to nature, right? You know, the extractive economy, for example, is dangerous for humanity. But we believe these things are natural, to want to dig up here to get oil and dig up to get this. Right? But this is what the capitalist model of economics tells us is normal, that we must conquer the earth. There's an interesting thing about Chief Seattle and Native American chief. And they asked him to sign a treaty given his land. So he's reminiscing and he's saying, you know, well, they call the great white father say I should sell my land because this is what the law requires. He said, but how can I sell the whisper of the wind in the pine? How can I sell the crow flying across the sky? How can I sell these intangibles, which is part of the reality of my life? But this is what capitalism demands and colonialism demands, that I sell this property. So he said, I can't sell the land, but this is what they tell me I should do. And we are not understanding this in the sense of the system, which is what I think Sister Esther said. It is a system. And this is the system that we have to break. This is a system that we have to change. It has a lot of talk about democracy and so on, you know. And what is this democracy that we're talking about, where we ratify leaders who have been selected before they are elected, and then they serve the interests of a minority, right, using our vote as the pretext to serve this minority when we, the majority, do not really benefit, and so on and so forth. Again, it comes back to the system. So unless we begin to understand the system under which we live that divides people, like I've said something, the dominant ethos in capitalism is competition. And I don't know, and I've read a lot about civilizations, and I don't know any great civilization that was developed through competition. I know civilizations developed through cooperation, where people cooperate. From our early days as small communities of humans, we cooperated to hunt, to farm. We cooperate. That's how we survive as a species. But suddenly, guys, you know, the greatest thing now is competition. So in the realm of sports, competition is okay. This morning I'm listening to a psychologist and he said part of the whole thing about this competition is testosterone. He said this is a kind of testosterone lift, you know, which then brings into play the malevolent patriarchy and the malevolent, what do you call it, manhood, malevolent manhood. But again, the system produces these things in order to advance its agenda, whether it's economic, political, or culture, even the extermination of people. And so we cannot discuss our relationship. While I understand we live in the present and we have every day to go and we have to eat and go to work and so on. And some of these issues are not things that you can by minute discuss. But at the back of our minds, we must move and must think, how do we transfer, how do we change the system? To just my final quote here, that Fidel will always say, how do we imagine a different world? We have to imagine a different world where women must be genuinely equal in that world. We have to imagine a different world where the resources of the world will be used for the benefit of humanity and not for the profit of a few. We have to imagine a world where technology is used to serve the interests of humanity. Like I told someone last week, there is no white technology or black technology. Technology is the property of humanity, of humankind. It began with the wheel, and then it evolved into other things. We have to understand these universal concepts. We have to develop the underlying philosophy, which I spoke about earlier. And then out of that philosophical construct or reconstruction, then we interpret the world through our own eyes, through our own lens, and through our own perspective. We must challenge the existence of this social, economic, and political order if we are to see meaningful change in terms of some of these issues that we are currently encountering.
Thanks so much, Brother Akka. Sister Esther and Brother Akka, before we leave, over and over again, we hear the strong black woman line, and a lot of we think that they want compliment, that they want good thing. Okay, what happen? I want strong black woman. When really, we are consistently sacrificing with mind, body, and spirit, and we don't have to. We really don't. So I just want to know, what are your thoughts, Sister Esther and Brother Akko, on the strong black woman narrative that a lot of us feed into, and you experience how it harm us as black women, our families, and our communities?
So for me, the notion of the strong black woman can be referred to again using another African heritage woman racialized as black analyst, sociologist, Dr. Patricia Hill Collins, who writes about controlling images of black women. And basically what these are stereotypes that provide the basis for dehumanization of black women and exploitation of their labor. And some of the typical controlling images are the mammy, the matriarch, the welfare mother or queen, the Jezebel, the sapphire, which is the angry black woman, and then the strong black woman, which I think perhaps is one of the most dangerous controlling images for us, because it's really this notion of a strong black woman archetype, which seemingly is positive, and something commendable. However, what it ends up doing is repackaging oppression as resilience, masking systematic or systemic, I should say, neglect and exploitation. So what it does is it reinforces messages or controlling images that require of specific things of us as women, such as we must never be vulnerable. Vulnerability is seen as a weakness, and weakness is not allowed. So we're to carry everything. We must never have need. So, that means, as you said, Sister YaYa, sacrificing ourselves and therefore not being open or able to receive, not asking for help. So we must be also indestructible in terms of our physical and emotional invincibility. And that we are expected to hold family and community together. We're seen as the backbone, the foundation, the glue, and that in itself can carry so much of a heavy cost on us. And what this image produces in reality is higher rates of depression and anxiety in women of African heritage who don't feel able to show vulnerability, dismissal of our pain in healthcare, leading to higher maternal rates of maternal mortality, untreated illnesses, and crisis unrecognized until it kind of leads to an overt collapse. Isolation, because the strong black woman cannot ask for support. And I think also it also results in the suppression of our spiritual, emotional, and relational needs.
Sister Esther, Brother Akko?
So, Sister YaYa, there is a African quote. It says, "The tree that bends with the wind survives the storm." It is impossible for any human being to be constantly in a position of rigidity at any level, whether it's emotional or physical. You go back again to the ancient text, and I find I'm quoting a lot philosophically this morning. They talk about the human body and the physical and metaphysical body, so about the Kemetic text. They talk about things like the car, the bar, the kaibit, right, and all of these philosophical and right. So the human being is made up of a physical body and a metaphysical body, which is the emotions and the psyche and all of these things. This is our ancient text, you know. So anytime you have to forgo anything, well, any one of these parts of the physical, whether it's emotion or your things to your psyche, you are being inhuman. And the idea of this superwoman is a creation of slavery and capitalism and neocolonialism and all the vestiges of capitalism in all its negative forms. Okay? So that, and why? Because men did not understand their responsibility, either their spiritual responsibility or their material responsibility. So at times, because women had the children and had other kinds of responsibilities, they were left with certain kinds of burdens. Again, part of the process of this system that enslaved not just our bodies, but also our minds. So it is impossible for any human being to be, this doctrine of stoicism to be stoic, right? That's what I call a crazy European doctrine, that nothing seems to affect you. At some point in time as a human being, something is going to affect you. It's impossible from creation to now for us to have attitudes that, and this is why these sort of emotionless people, this is why we have fascism. That's why we have all these killings and what you call mass killers and serial killers. Because the critical component of the human being, of what I call the metaphysical body, ceases to exist. And so what replaces it is something very demonic, or something, what is it? Nature abhors a vacuum, something vacuous, a vacuum. Nature, so whatever vacuum exists in your soul, something is going to fill it that is not consistent with humanity. And this is what we are dealing with. This is why, again, I'm reading this book, Lenin, the State and the Revolution, rereading it after how many, 25 years. And he said, look, part of the thing is that we have to change the state. The state as we exist is not just a physical thing with laws. It is also a metaphysical concept in our heads. And it teaches us certain things. So it said the state is the people, and how, if it is the people, that is what is in our heads, and it doesn't serve our interests. So therefore, again, the process of deconstruction, the process of reconstruction, and we have to root these things in our own historical and spiritual realities. It is impossible for any human being, right, to be inflexible. To begin with the quote that I said, right, the tree that bends with the storm, the tree that bends in the wind survives the storm. Flexibility, discretion, all of these things are part of the human experience, taught culturally and socially. Unfortunately for us as African people, these things to a large extent have not been taught in the context of our own traditions. And therefore we develop these responses that are not helpful to us emotionally, that are not helpful to us collectively, and that are not helpful to us in the pursuit of a just and free and fair world.
Big thanks. We're already past 12 o'clock, but make I give you a quick minute Final thoughts, Sister Esther, final thoughts, Brother Akko, on today's reasoning.
Just to say what a wonderful pleasure it's been to be here again, and I've really enjoyed the reasoning, Brother Akko, and with yourself too, Sister YaYa. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome, Sister Esther. Brother Akko?
So we have to honor our women, respect our elders, and prepare our youth. That is the underpinning of the new society. Honor our women, respect our elders, and prepare our youth. That's
Big respect, Sister Esther Xosei, Pan-Africanist, Reparationist, scholar activist, and Brother Akko Mutota, revolutionary from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Downstairs at the security booth, we have security guard Brother Shane Flowers. Upstairs at XTV, we have our Sistah MCO technical director, Sister Christy Flowers. On the second floor in Creme Radio, of Larry Guerrero, known as Larry G. This show will repeat at 5:30 this evening on local XTV channels. And you could always go to XTV Belize Facebook and YouTube pages to listen to it at your convenience and to share the link. Big respect again, Sister Esther, for taking time this morning, Brother Akko for being with us. We should be here next Sunday morning from 10:30 to noon Central Standard Time, Belize time. And until then, remember, say, only organized people want to save the people.
Thank you, Sister Esther. Thank you, Sister Esther.
Take care. Bye.
Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots.